Infrasonic Weapon. In the later stages of World War II, as Germany's conventional weapons struggled to keep pace with Allied firepower, Nazi scientists began exploring a darker, less visible form of warfare, one that attacked the human body itself. It was known internally as an infrasonic weapon. Unlike audible sound, infrasound operates at frequencies below the range of human hearing. You can't hear it, you can't see it, but at the right intensity, it can cause extreme nausea, disorientation, organ failure, and in some cases, death. According to post-war intelligence fragments and testimonies from captured engineers, German researchers theorized that concentrated infrasound could be used to incapacitate enemy soldiers without firing a single shot. The weapon's design involved massive oscillating diaphragms powered by combustion engines, intended to emit low-frequency waves across open terrain. Early tests reportedly produced alarming results. Laboratory animals exposed to the device exhibited immediate panic, loss of balance, internal hemorrhaging, and cardiac failure. Human test subjects, often prisoners, experienced crushing chest pressure, blurred vision, and overwhelming dread before collapsing. Doctors observing the experiments struggled to explain the symptoms, as no external injuries were present. The most unsettling detail was the psychological effect. Survivors described an intense sense of fear, as if their bodies were reacting to a threat their minds couldn't perceive. Nazi researchers believed this weapon could be deployed against advancing infantry, or even used to disrupt pilots mid-flight. But the technology was dangerously unstable. Generating sustained infrasonic waves required enormous power, and the devices were difficult to control. Several engineers reportedly suffered severe injuries during calibration attempts. One test facility was allegedly abandoned after prolonged exposure rendered staff chronically ill. As Allied forces closed in, the project was abruptly terminated. Equipment was dismantled. Research notes were destroyed or buried among thousands of unrelated documents. Scientists involved were reassigned to other programs or quietly absorbed into post-war research efforts under Allied supervision. When investigators later reviewed German weapons programs, references to infrasonic experimentation appeared briefly, then vanished behind heavy redactions. No complete prototype has ever been recovered. No operational weapon has ever been confirmed. Whether Nazi Germany truly came close to mastering sound as a weapon, or uncovered something far more dangerous than they anticipated, remains a disturbing question buried deep within the erased inventions of World War II. The Silbervogel, orbital bomber. As World War II dragged on and Allied forces gained air superiority, German military planners began searching for a way to strike enemies far beyond the reach of conventional aircraft. Their solution was something that seemed impossible for its time. It was called Silbervogel, meaning the silver bird, a revolutionary aerospace design that aimed to turn the upper atmosphere itself into a weapon. Conceived by Austrian engineer Eugen Tanger, the Silbervogel was not a traditional bomber. Instead, it was designed to be launched by a massive rocket-powered sled, accelerating the aircraft to extreme speeds before sending it skipping along the edge of space. Using a series of controlled atmospheric bounces, the craft could theoretically travel across continents. Its intended target was staggering. Plans suggested the Silbervogel could strike cities on the far side of the Atlantic, including New York, before gliding safely back to Earth. At a time when long-range bombers struggled to cross Europe, the idea of a suborbital strike vehicle bordered on science fiction, but the engineering challenges were immense. Calculations showed that the heat generated during re-entry would exceed anything existing materials could withstand. Control systems were unreliable. The rocket launch infrastructure alone would have required enormous resources Germany no longer possessed. Despite these obstacles, wind tunnel tests were conducted, mathematical models refined, and classified reports circulated among top Nazi officials. Allied intelligence later discovered references to the project, describing it as the most advanced aerospace concept of the war. And then it vanished. As Germany collapsed, Silbervogel's documentation was scattered, seized, or destroyed. Sanger himself survived the war and later worked in other aerospace programs, but the bomber was never completed. Its blueprints disappeared into archives, some remaining classified for decades. Years later, similar concepts quietly resurfaced in Cold War spaceplane research. Whether Silbervogel was truly erased or simply reborn under different flags remains one of World War II's most unsettling technological ghosts. The Sun Gun. Near the end of World War II, as Germany's military situation became increasingly desperate, Nazi scientists proposed a weapon so extreme that even some high-ranking officials dismissed it as fantasy. It was known simply as the Sun Gun. The concept originated from theoretical studies conducted by German physicists who believed solar energy could be weaponized from space. Their proposal involved placing a massive concave mirror into orbit, a structure kilometers wide designed to focus sunlight onto a single point on Earth. In theory, the concentrated beam could ignite cities, boil oceans, or incinerate enemy installations without warning. The weapon required no explosives, no fuel once deployed, only the sun. German engineers envisioned the mirror constructed from metallic sodium panels, assembled in orbit by crews operating from space stations. According to surviving documents, early calculations suggested that such a system could generate temperatures high enough to cause instant destruction over targeted areas. The idea was presented to Nazi leadership as a long-term, war-winning superweapon, but the challenges were monumental. At the time, Germany lacked the rockets, materials, and orbital capability necessary to place even small objects into space. The project never progressed beyond theoretical research and classified design studies. Yet what makes the Sun Gun unsettling is not that it failed, but that it was seriously considered. As Allied forces advanced, research materials related to orbital weapons were seized or destroyed. Most references to the Sun Gun vanished into post-war archives, dismissed publicly as absurd speculation. Decades later, declassified Cold War documents revealed that similar concepts were quietly revisited by multiple superpowers. Whether the Sun Gun was a mad fantasy or an idea far ahead of its time remains a reminder of how far wartime desperation can push human imagination. The Death Ray. Long before lasers became a reality, Nazi researchers were already chasing the idea of a weapon that could destroy targets at a distance using pure energy. They called it, unofficially, the Death Ray. During World War II, German scientists explored multiple concepts involving directed energy, including concentrated particle beams and high-powered electromagnetic radiation. The goal was simple in theory: project destructive energy across the battlefield to disable aircraft, detonate explosives, or incapacitate soldiers without physical contact. Some of these experiments were inspired by earlier work from inventors like Nikola Tesla, whose ideas about wireless energy transmission fascinated military researchers on both sides of the war. German physicists believed that if energy could be focused tightly enough, it could function as an invisible weapon. Testing reportedly began at isolated facilities, where experimental emitters were constructed using massive electrical generators and complex focusing arrays. According to post-war intelligence summaries, these early prototypes produced short bursts of intense radiation capable of damaging sensitive equipment and causing severe burns at close range. However, the technology was wildly unstable. Power demands exceeded what portable systems could provide. components overheated or failed catastrophically. Several test operators allegedly suffered radiation exposure during trials, forcing repeated shutdowns of the program. Despite these setbacks, the project continued in limited form, fueled by the belief that even a partial breakthrough could give Germany a decisive advantage. Documents suggest researchers hoped to scale the technology for air defense purposes, potentially disabling Allied bombers without firing a single round. As Germany's defeat became inevitable, the Death Ray project was abruptly terminated. Equipment was dismantled, test facilities were abandoned, technical notes disappeared into Allied intelligence vaults or were destroyed to prevent misuse. Publicly, the idea was later dismissed as pseudoscience. Yet decades later, directed energy weapons quietly became reality. Whether Germany came closer than history admits or uncovered dangers too great to pursue remains buried among the erased inventions of World War II. The magnetic mine disruptor. As Allied naval forces tightened their blockade around Europe, German engineers faced a critical problem: how to counter the growing effectiveness of Allied magnetic mines, silently destroying submarines and surface ships. Their response was a device so specialized and so secret that it barely survived the war on paper. It was known as the magnetic mine disruptor. Magnetic mines were designed to detonate when sensing changes in Earth's magnetic field caused by passing ships. To counter this, German researchers began experimenting with powerful electromagnetic systems capable of neutralizing or prematurely triggering these mines from a safe distance. The concept involved mounting large magnetic coils along a vessel's hull, generating controlled magnetic fields that could either confuse mine sensors or cancel out a ship's magnetic signature entirely. Early tests showed promise. Vessels equipped with prototype systems reportedly passed through mined waters without triggering explosions. But the technology came with serious risks. Generating strong magnetic fields required immense electrical power, straining ship generators and interfering with onboard navigation instruments. In some cases, test crews reported sudden equipment failures, loss of compass accuracy, and unexplained electrical surges during activation. More troubling were reports that improperly calibrated systems could trigger nearby mines instantly, with devastating consequences. Despite these dangers, the German Navy continued limited testing, viewing the disruptor as essential for submarine survival. As Allied forces advanced and supply chains collapsed, the project was quietly shelved. After the war, Allied intelligence seized fragments of research notes describing magnetic countermeasure experiments. Much of the material was classified, with details omitted from public naval histories. Today, modern navies use sophisticated magnetic signature reduction techniques. Whether these technologies trace their origins to erased World War II experiments or were independently rediscovered remains an unanswered question, hidden beneath the waves. As the ice bomb. During World War II, as nations raced to out-innovate one another, some ideas were so unconventional they seemed almost absurd. One of them involved ice. Not ordinary ice, but a strange reinforced material that could rival steel. The project became known as the ice bomb, and it centered around a substance few had ever heard of. It was called pykrete. Pykrete was a mixture of ice and wood pulp, and when frozen together, it exhibited extraordinary properties. It melted slowly, resisted bullets, and was far stronger than solid ice alone. Tests showed that blocks of pykrete could withstand gunfire and explosive impacts that shattered conventional materials. Military planners envisioned an astonishing application. They proposed constructing massive floating platforms, essentially unsinkable aircraft carriers, built almost entirely from ice. These structures could be stationed in the open ocean, providing air bases far beyond the reach of enemy attacks. The advantages were enormous. Ice was cheap, readily available, difficult to destroy. Even if damaged, the structure could be repaired by simply refreezing it. According to internal studies, such platforms could be miles long and nearly impossible to sink. But reality soon intervened. Maintaining pykrete required constant refrigeration, enormous energy, and complex infrastructure. The logistics of keeping an ice structure frozen in open water proved daunting. As the war progressed and priorities shifted, the project lost momentum. By the time the conflict ended, the ice bomb concept was quietly abandoned. Documentation was archived. Prototypes melted away, literally. Public records barely mentioned the project, and for decades it was dismissed as a wartime curiosity. Yet modern research has confirmed pykrete's remarkable properties. Whether the ice bomb was an impractical fantasy or a revolutionary idea abandoned too soon remains another example of how World War II pushed science to its most extreme and forgotten limits. The Vortex Cannon. As World War II intensified, military researchers began searching for weapons that could bypass armor, defenses, and even physical barriers altogether. One idea focused not on bullets or explosives, but on air itself. It was known as the Vortex Cannon. The concept was deceptively simple. By forcing air through a specially designed chamber and releasing it in controlled bursts, the device could generate spinning rings of compressed air, invisible projectiles capable of traveling long distances while retaining destructive force. In laboratory tests, these air vortices struck with surprising power. Light structures were damaged, targets were knocked over. In some experiments, animals exposed to the blasts suffered internal injuries despite showing no external wounds. Engineers believed that if scaled correctly, the weapon could disrupt infantry formations, damage aircraft during takeoff, or incapacitate crews without visible trauma. What made the Vortex Cannon particularly appealing was its stealth. The weapon produced no muzzle flash, no shrapnel, and minimal sound. To an observer, the damage appeared sudden and inexplicable, as if caused by an unseen force. Military planners envisioned its use in ambush scenarios or defensive installations where conventional weapons were impractical. But the technology proved difficult to control. Maintaining consistent vortex formation required precise timing and immense pressure. Minor miscalculations caused the air rings to dissipate harmlessly or rebound unpredictably. Several test operators were reportedly injured during early trials when pressure systems malfunctioned. As resources dwindled and the war turned decisively against its creators, development slowed. Test facilities were abandoned. Research notes were scattered or destroyed. Post-war intelligence reports referenced compressed air weapon experiments only briefly before the topic vanished into classified archives. Today, small-scale vortex technology exists for scientific demonstrations and crowd control research. Whether wartime engineers were closer to a battlefield-ready version than history admits, or whether the Vortex Cannon was simply too unstable to survive, remains another erased invention swallowed by the chaos of World War II. The Weather Control Project. As World War II raged across continents, military planners began to realize that one force shaped every battle, yet belonged to no army: the weather. If it could be controlled, even briefly, it could ground aircraft, flood supply lines, or decide the outcome of entire campaigns. This belief gave rise to a secretive initiative, later referred to as the Weather Control Project. Researchers explored whether atmospheric conditions could be artificially manipulated using chemical dispersal, electromagnetic fields, and large-scale environmental interference. The goal was not to create storms from nothing, but to nudge existing systems into more destructive forms. Experiments focused on cloud formation, precipitation enhancement, and pressure disruption. Some reports claimed that seeding certain cloud types could trigger heavy rainfall or localized fog dense enough to blind pilots and artillery observers. The implications were staggering. A battlefield could be drowned in mud overnight. Air raids could be delayed or redirected. Enemy movements could be slowed without firing a single weapon. In theory, even slight atmospheric changes could alter the course of an operation. But the atmosphere proved far less predictable than anticipated. Results varied wildly. Some tests produced no measurable effects. Others created unexpected conditions that spread far beyond their intended areas. There were concerns that interference with weather systems could backfire, disrupting friendly operations or causing civilian harm. As the war progressed, the project became increasingly controversial. Reliable documentation was scarce. Many experiments were poorly recorded or deliberately obscured. After the war, references to wartime weather manipulation appeared briefly in intelligence files, then disappeared behind classification walls. Publicly, such ideas were dismissed as speculation. Yet in the decades that followed, weather modification quietly re-emerged as a field of scientific research. Whether World War II experiments truly demonstrated early weather control or merely exposed the limits of human ambition remains another mystery erased from official history. The Ghost Aircraft Program. During World War II, visibility meant survival. Aircraft that could be seen could be tracked. Tracked aircraft could be intercepted. And so, behind closed doors, engineers began pursuing an idea that sounded impossible for its time, an aircraft designed to be almost invisible. This effort became known as the Ghost Aircraft Program. Researchers explored ways to reduce an aircraft's visual, acoustic, and radar signature using unconventional shapes, experimental coatings, and non-reflective materials. Some designs featured smooth, blended surfaces intended to scatter light rather than reflect it. Others tested matte paints infused with unusual compounds believed to absorb detection signals. Pilots involved in early trials reported unsettling experiences. From certain angles, the aircraft seemed to blur against the sky, becoming difficult to track even at close range. Observers on the ground described planes that appeared briefly, then vanished without cloud cover or evasive maneuvers. The most ambitious concepts went even further. Engineers theorized that electromagnetic interference could be used to distort how aircraft appeared on early radar systems. While the technology was crude, tests suggested it might be possible to reduce detection ranges just enough to delay interception. But the program faced severe limitations. Materials were scarce, manufacturing tolerances were inconsistent, and the science behind radar absorption was still poorly understood. Results varied from promising to completely ineffective. As the war neared its end, the Ghost Aircraft Program was quietly shut down. Designs were archived, prototypes dismantled, records classified or lost during the chaos of surrender. Publicly, no such aircraft officially existed. Yet decades later, stealth technology would emerge, using principles eerily similar to those explored during World War II. Whether the Ghost Aircraft Program was an early glimpse of the future or an experiment buried because it worked too well remains one of the war's most intriguing erased inventions. The memory manipulation experiments. As World War II pushed science into darker territory, some researchers began exploring a battlefield no weapon could destroy: the human mind. Behind locked doors and classified files, experiments were conducted to determine whether memory itself could be altered, erased, or reshaped. This effort would later be whispered about as the memory manipulation experiments. The research focused on the effects of extreme stress, sensory deprivation, chemical compounds, and repetitive psychological conditioning. Subjects were exposed to prolonged isolation, disorienting environments, and substances believed to weaken memory formation or blur recall. The goal was chilling. If memories could be disrupted, soldiers could be interrogated without resistance networks could be dismantled, prisoners could be released without fear of disclosure because they would remember nothing. Reports from surviving documents describe subjects who lost track of time, forgot personal identities, or experienced fragmented recall after repeated sessions. Some developed long-term psychological damage. Others became unresponsive altogether. The most troubling aspect was how quietly the work was abandoned. As the war ended, records were destroyed or sealed. Researchers disappeared into post-war programs or vanished from history entirely. Officially, no systematic memory experiments were ever acknowledged. Yet, in the decades that followed, similar techniques resurfaced under different names in different countries with different justifications. Whether World War II researchers truly uncovered methods to manipulate memory or opened doors that should never have been touched remains the final, unsettling chapter among the forbidden inventions erased from history. Experiments focused on cloud formation, precipitation enhancement, and pressure disruption. Some reports claimed that seeding certain cloud types could trigger heavy rainfall or localized fog dense enough to blind pilots and artillery observers. The implications were staggering. A battlefield could be drowned in mud overnight. Air raids could be delayed or redirected. Enemy movements could be slowed without firing a single weapon. In theory, even slight atmospheric changes could alter the course of an operation. But the atmosphere proved far less predictable than anticipated. Results varied wildly. Some tests produced no measurable effects. Others created unexpected conditions that spread far beyond their intended areas. There were concerns that interference with weather systems could backfire, disrupting friendly operations or causing civilian harm. As the war progressed, the project became increasingly controversial. Reliable documentation was scarce. Many experiments were poorly recorded or deliberately obscured. After the war, references to wartime weather manipulation appeared briefly in intelligence files, then disappeared behind classification walls. Officially, such ideas were dismissed as speculation. Yet, in the decades that followed, weather modification quietly re-emerged as a field of scientific research. Whether World War II experiments truly demonstrated early weather control or merely exposed the limits of human ambition remains another mystery erased from official history.